school has been closed because of the sinkhole that's opened up. This is an early testing. But I believe that we're in the same karst topography here in this area, this part of the state. And karst is, I mean, really complicated. The geology under this land is really complicated. To what extent does TVA, or to what extent does the NRC know what the geology is?
I think just within the answer lies in the validation that the plant was able to be built in the original siting criteria on this property. And that original siting criteria included going down to certain types of bedrock, certain types of soil, compact soil, before you even lay the first base mat. And I think that therein lies the assurance that it's not susceptible to the same opening up as a school would be, because certainly they didn't go to that extent when they built the school, more than likely. There's much more analysis done on the site topography, bedrock analysis to show where and how that stability would be maintained at the other different there. I think that's the answer.
Okay, for example, I think at Vogel, they dug down about 90 feet, and then they backfilled it, so that would preclude any, if there was a sinkhole, it would be uncovered there. And it's backfilled and compacted for the pad, the basement out.
I think just within the answer lies in the validation that the plant was able to be built in the original siting criteria on this property. And that original siting criteria included going down to certain types of bedrock, certain types of soil, compact soil, before you even lay the first base mat. And I think that therein lies the assurance that it's not susceptible to the same opening up as a school would be, because certainly they didn't go to that extent when they built the school, more than likely. There's much more analysis done on the site topography, bedrock analysis to show where and how that stability would be maintained at the other different there. I think that's the answer.
Okay, for example, I think at Vogel, they dug down about 90 feet, and then they backfilled it, so that would preclude any, if there was a sinkhole, it would be uncovered there. And it's backfilled and compacted for the pad, the basement out.
I have a question about the unplanned scrams you put them in a 700 critical hours span. What does critical hours mean? The 7,000 critical hours, is that just an arbitrary number that you choose? And how many of those are allowed per 7,000 hours? And how many are design basis?
Well, it's essentially a calculation. Critical hours is basically when time that the reactor was critical. So, for example, you could look back 7,000 hours if the reactor was critical in the past 7,000 hours. You would literally count up how many trips. But then you can get into, well, if you had an outage in that span, then it kind of extends out that 7,000. So you look at the past 7,000 critical hours. So you have to track when was the reactor critical, when was it shut down. Off the top of my head, it's a calculation. I'm going to say it's approximately 3 reactor trips per 7,000 critical hours. And the licensee actually, all the licensees in the country, they do an equation, and I cannot remember the exact numbers, but it is on the website. I can show you. But essentially, nominally, it's 7,000 hours. I believe is like 1 year nominally.
Oh, okay, that's what I was
It's
wondering.
under our performance indicator program. So if you go on our webpage, nrc.gov, it talks
Performance indicator program.
about, yeah, it'll talk about how we came up with those numbers and what the program's about. And different
They
thresholds.
made it more complicated.
But basically, that's a year.
It is, and effectively, through looking at history as nuclear plants' performance has improved over the years, the number of trips has reduced significantly from the late 80s. And they're doing very, very well as far as the number of trips per year. When the NRC developed their performance indicators, they looked at what threshold would we want to start looking at that licensee again if they had increased trips. And they chose that number, which is approximately maybe 3 trips per 7,000 critical hours, where we would say, that's above the norm, let's give that a look. So that's where that white threshold comes in.
I see.
So those trips, we're very familiar with what those were. We looked at the root causes. They appear to be different. They're all from different things. They're not necessarily anything that would have been safety significant. It's just that the plant tripped. The safety
So
system.
when you say trip, you mean it went,
It shut
down?
automatically, shut down.
Unplanned shutdown. Now, partial or full or?
Normally, it's a full shutdown, and it could be from any power level. So you could be starting the plant up, and you could get an indicator, and it would trip the plant, or you could be at 100% power.
That really clarified that. I do wonder though, how many, this design, this ice condenser design, how many design basis unplanned trips can it have?
I believe it's it's approximately the same for all PWRs in general. The uniqueness of the ice condenser is simply located in how the containment is built and structured. It has an ice condenser.
It's thinner.
I'm sorry?
Your containment is thinner than other.
It has to hold less pressure, and it has a different thickness than some other PWRs, because it maintains
But do you know what the design basis
It's
number is
well,
on there?
it depends what number you're looking for. There's no set number for the number of trips. That's a consequence of how well safety systems are performing, parameters are being maintained, and that's consistent between every PWR.
So it doesn't have like a lifespan that's after 100,000 miles, we need to
No,
do an overhaul?
I think we might be talking two different things. The containment structure is just different at ice condensers than it is with large volume PWR units. It has really nothing to do with that particular performance indicator.
Well, but it doesn't, it's my understanding that unplanned trips cool very quickly, much more quickly than it's designed to cool. If you do a planned shutdown, you do it gradually, so you don't get the embrittlement of the containment. Cracks.
In general, when you're
Age.
talking about the trips, I think you're talking about the reactor coolant system versus the containment.
The reactor, excuse me,
Reactor coolant system.
cooling system.
Yes,
Well,
that's the reactor vessel with all the loop piping. So that in general is what we monitor for if things are going to cool down quickly. And yes, there is a limit for how many cycles, how many thermal cycles it can go through.
Exactly.
And the licensee tracks those. I don't want to throw a number out that's not right. I
How
remember
do
one
we
that's right
find
here in
this
my head.
number and how do we find
But
how close we are to
the
it?
licensee tracks the number of thermal cycles, and the heat up rates are part of their technical specifications, so that you can gradually heat up and you can quickly cool down, and you can do that, and it's safe to do that unless you do it too many times.
Exactly.
I think I understand where you're going with this, that
Well, I'm
if you have 3 trips every year, are you going to exceed that over the life of the plant? I think the answer is no.
If you have 3 trips every year.
Yeah, and that's every year. So
Well, I don't know how many trips you've had.
yeah, and
But,
That is not
everything
wrong.
ages, and so, I'm a little concerned about, because it has a thinner containment, and because we know that these trips, these thermal shocks, basically do cause aging and cracking. A thinner containment, to me, would be a concern for that issue. It seems to me.
you can talk after the meeting and get through some of the details.
So, how do you examine that? I mean, how do you?
The-
Just the 3 a year, is that it, or do you actually go in and inspect for aging cracks and?
Again, it's a performance indicator for reactor trips. It really doesn't have anything to do with the type of containment or the cycles on the containment temperature. It's really to do with the reactor coolant system.
No, but I'm asking if you inspect these containments that are thinner 10 containments in other reactors?
Yes.
How do you inspect them?
There are.
Do you have instruments that go in there and do magnification inspections?
Well, in general, there's visual inspections on containments, the tendons and everything else that makes up that structure. There's also pressure tests that we periodically have a licensee do to basically pressurize the containment, get a leakage rate out of it that would show degradation. And then there's other visuals that they do as well. They look at all penetrations that go inside through the containments. You have pipes that go in and out of them. Each one of those has a separate type of test that is performed in those penetrations. And so collectively, you're testing and looking at the majority of things that you can get to. And that's done on a periodic basis.
Do you know where I can find out about the design basis and the actual thermal shocks it's been
Well,
through?
We could start with the testing, and that's 10 CFR 50.
Which,
Appendix C.
for testing?
Appendix J, sorry.
Yeah.
10 CFR 50, Appendix J, is where all the testing for containment.
You have about 75% in cooling pools from what's stored on site, is that?
I don't know the percentage of it. I mean, I couldn't tell you the percentage of what I've got.
You don't know how many assemblies, spent fuel assemblies are over 5 years in your cooling pools here
Not off the top
Sequoyah?
of my head, I mean, we track that information. My reactor engineers have a specific map that they understand, and they know exactly where every spent fuel assembly and any new fuel assembly is. That's all tracked in accordance with our tech specs, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, what percentage and how old they are. That information I have with reactor engineering, but not something that I can readily.
You have a plan, does Sequoyah have a plan set up to move those assemblies out of the spent fuel pool into cask, a specific plan?
Yes, sir, and that's what we're doing right now.
Is that what?
All of them are set up on, I'm John Carlin, the
Yeah.
Senate Vice President. All of them are set up on a schedule that's predicated on the amount of heat that they generate. And we sit down and we have a long-term plan to move all of the fuel at some point from the pool to the pad. And that is one of our strategies, and so we're going to do that. We're going to do it in a very measured, controlled manner. We have reactor engineers, these are highly trained men and women, who calculate the heat that's being produced, because there are licenses predicated on the amount of heat that you can put into one of these containers. And so we're very careful, and it's done very judiciously. We have radiological protection technicians, we have health physicists involved, we have oversight, we have an intact team that does this. This is a group of professionals who understand this, and they're very well schooled in the technology on how to do this safely, and we've done this event free. And we continue to be focused on that. And then, again, it's to put this fuel in a very large right cylinder, tall right cylinder with weighs over 100 tons, and it's a very robust structure, and it puts us in a position where we maintain the fuel in a very safe environment, and that will protect the public's health and safety. And it's been well designed and well considered. It's gone through countless reviews, and these are in use around the world.
And it's important to notice that both pools and spent fuel dry gas storage are licensed by the NRC to hold fuel. And certainly, post-Fukushima, there are improvements that could be made to monitoring techniques. We all saw that on the news, how they didn't quite know where the water level was, etc. There's things that they're doing to do that, and the NRC is working with the licenses to develop what's the best thing to do there. So both are licensed, both are safe for the storage of the fuel. I know that there's a good thing that the licensees are taking as aggressive as they could of taking the spent fuel in the pool and moving it to the pad. That's probably the smart move.
Is there any place we can find what TVA's plan is for frequency of movement of the spent fuel assemblies into the into hardened storage. We're talking about Sequoyah here, so Sequoyah would be fine. I mean, do y'all have a public listing for that plan?
Would you put that in
I don't believe we put it into it, and I'm trying to think of a public document would be done. We do it on a regular basis, typically it amounts to about every 18 months. We're in the process of moving some amount of our fuel. As Paul said, this time we're going to fill 10 cylinders up with fuel, so that's roughly 320.
I actually think there's information that the licensee sends to our NRR group that annotates how many they're going to move in what sequence. So I think that is a submittal that the licensee makes to the NRC. And I think you can search the NRC website and find out those submittals. You can look for the submittals related to spent fuel storage.
But you don't really have a requirement that they,
They
after
move
5
fuel.
years, or
Our requirement
10
is
years.
within their original spec of how many fuel samples
The heat,
in their pool.
the amount of heat, and yeah.
Well, no, original spec, I guess that's relative, because, you know, we find out, I mean, we've been around at many of these meetings, and we screen all the requirements for what, and specifications, and of course, specifications have been changed numerous times. In other words, what that fuel pool may have been allowed to hold upon original construction may be different at this time.
Absolutely. There could have
So-
been a re-rack, they could hold more assemblies than original.
But of course, one of the reasons we're interested, and many organizations are interested, is because one of the findings, you know, for instance, Fukushima, one thing that was very apparent is that the spent fuel that was in the cask at Fukushima didn't move a bit, or very little. But of course, there was a different situation with the plant, all sorts of problems. So as a result of that, you know, there has been some findings that, hey, the spent fuel, and there's been a lot of discussion within NRC and Congress and TVA to get the spent fuel out of the pools. Now, no doubt, Sequoiah's pools are more secure than Brown's Ferry. Brown's Ferry, you know, is overhead, and that's that. But Sequoiah's pools, I believe, are actually in a concrete bunker-like facility. Am I correct on that?
Is that right?
Basically, I mean, it seems to be much more secure here than it is at Browns Ferry. But we're really interested in knowing what type of plan there is to, even at a secure bunker type thing, to get those spent assemblies out of there and into that dry gas storage. We're interested in that plan.
I think for what we can address at this meeting, I think what the licensee has conveyed is they're aggressively taking measures to move from the pool to the casks, but they have to stay within the NRC limits of that licensed cask. They can't put it in too soon, it's got to cool
Sure.
off.
And as the NRC, you're not looking at that as a performance indicator
No,
for
sir.
each? Okay.
At least for the annual assessment meeting, we don't. And I don't believe there is a performance indicator of any kind that actually measures that. But what we do make sure is that they maintain the limits within their license for both the pool and the cask. I think it's more in the lines of, it's an accepted philosophy, a good philosophy, that both the licensee and the NRC has kind of endorsed that it's probably better to move it to dry gas storage as we can.
I got you. Now, over here at the plant, y'all kind of cut the head off of the reactor. Marvelous engineering. I mean, the secondary containment over here, marvelous engineering job. And when we went to the TVA meeting, saw the cranes and watched it on the news, seen videos of it. Just marvelous engineering task. But in reforming and reshaping and replacing that cap on the secondary containment, is there what type of testing was performed to ensure that the total containment is secure and safe as compared to what it was previously to meet those design specifications, since obviously the original design has been altered? Was there a complete testing regimen that was done over the full secondary containment to include tensioning rods, concrete, and steel? Could you kind of describe how that was? And did the NRC inspect that?
Wesley was our lead for managing our inspections on the steam generator replacement project. And that the full integrated test was performed after that was replaced, and all the attendants were, after they cut that section out, they essentially put the section back in, re-poured, and then the test was done after that.
And it was TVA came to us with a license amendment to do this change out. And so we at headquarters had our technical reviewers review that process, what tests they were going to use afterwards to verify that they were in compliance. And then, we looked at their evaluation and accepted it and gave them our evaluation, our safety evaluation report back and gave them the okay to do that. So then like Scott said, we watched it through regional inspectors and myself, watched them do the test and made sure they were in compliance with their
It's
license.
effectively the same test that they periodically do on the containment. You'd expect them to re-verify all the baseline tests, and that's effectively what they did. To answer your question.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
What was the result?
Fast. It wouldn't be operating if they didn't.
Not cracked. My question is, are we putting more into the spent fuel pool than we're taking out? Because crowding creates risk for more explosions, hydrogen buildup, whatever. And so that's really my question. How crowded is the spent fuel pool? And if we're making more and more nuclear energy, then it seems like we're going to have more and more waste. And it's going into the spent fuel pool first, and then has to cool off for 5 years, whatever it is. How are we doing on that? Are we crowding it more?
I don't know any specific numbers, but certainly everything was going up as far as the volume of the spent fuel pools before licensees had the ability to do dry cast. And most utilities have that ability. So without getting specific numbers, I'd say they are taking more out now. They have to stay ahead of it, just as a matter of they will run out of room if they don't. Now they have an extra incentive to get it out too because of the Fukushima issue.
But you're making it.
I think that
But
they
you're also
mentioned
making
that the dry cast campaign is going to nominally take about 320 assemblies out of the pool. And I believe nominally every outage, they might put in 50. They'll take out 1/3 of the pool, is about 150 assemblies. So that's probably 75 between 2 units and 18 months cycles. It's about 75 assemblies would go into the pool every year. But in this lump sum, they're taking out 320, so they're taking out quite a bit. There's gonna be much more room, and again, they're gonna continue this campaign.
320 is how many casts?
It's 10 casts, like 32
Okay, so that's the-
slots in each cast.
So
There's 10.
that's a go for a year, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what they're doing now, but that's not that varies.
Oh, yeah.
It may vary based on our operational situation. We try and get as much out as we can. We do it on a reasonable basis. It's a very planned and structured evolution. One of the things that the issue of are we making more? The answer is no. We refuel every 18 months, and we take roughly the same amount out each time. So we've been on an 18-month cycle since basically probably since the early 80s anyway. So it's been that way. So we're not producing more assemblies at any more rate. We obviously get our megawattage up a little bit.
So the used to be 20% nuclear power for TVA, now it's more like 30%, but that's because you're dropping off coal percentage?
Well, because we have some older coal units that we've retired. That obviously was one. Browns Ferry came online. That's another, that's where one return to service. We anticipate the placing in service of Wattsbar Unit 2. So obviously there is the potential for more energy being produced, electrical energy being produced by nuclear going forward. And so I'm buoyed by that. I think it's a great technology. But Sequoyah, in terms of the amount of waste that's going in the pool, it hasn't shifted much at all, if any at all, over the last 30 years of operation. And then what we do is we want to minimize that heat load in that pool. Okay, I don't want to say that nothing in life is easy, but it's just easier when you don't have, if I don't have that energy in that pool. And so it's a good safety decision, and safety is where we start. It gives us better margins to safety when we're shut down, and we discharge that new fuel, which is going to be warm. If I don't have a big heat load in there already, and I put some, just recently from the reactor fuel in there, I got more, I don't have as much heat in that pool to start with, and so I'm not going to see as big a temperature change. It's easier to manage, so there's a good reason to do it. Two, we can keep it in the geometry in the pool. We can have it in locations that facilitates even better cooling, and we can also have it in a safe, even a more safe geometry around the pool. So it's got some real advantages. Third thing is I can get it out of the pool. I have that much less rad waste to manage, okay, in terms of to actively manage them. It's in a 100 plus ton container, you still have to manage it, you still have to provide security and radiological protection and that oversight, but it's a bit more static than it would be in the pool. So it's a good business decision to get it on the pad as well. So there are a lot of good drivers. Safety being number one, both radiological safety, right, and then as you talked about, weather, and never know what. So we always want to do the right thing. And then the other part is it makes good business sense. So as Scott said, we're going to put as much on the pad as soon as we safely can do it in a very, very controlled way. But it's got to be safe, and it starts with safety and it ends with safety, and it's everything that we do.
It's on concrete pads and it's cool, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. It's sitting on a very robust structure. It's an engineered concrete pad. It's not, going back to where your concern is, we're talking about something that is very robust pad. This is not, some concrete, it's not the patio. Okay, this is a very, very thick piece of concrete, reinforced with rebar, heavily, an engineered design mat underneath it. We talked about the dig out and the filling and all that. All of that's been done. And then these are positioned in an engineered location on the pad to make sure that we don't overload the pad or cause any other issues with it. So it's extremely exacting where they go, and they're specifically positioned to ensure that.
Excuse me.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry. What is the design lifespan for those? I mean, is it 100 years or 60 years? Do you know?
Oh, it's a long time.
Do you know which model they are? I could probably look it up that way.
Holtec.
I know Holtec, but there are a lot of different Holtecs.
These are the Holtec. I could but they're manufactured by Holtec, and they hold 32 assemblies, and
You can probably Google Voltec 32 service life and
Okay.
get it.
they can tell you, but it is quite a long time.
In the NRC's annual evaluation, did y'all evaluate emergency response and preparedness for this area? Did y'all evaluate an extended station blackout? That would be emergency equipment, generators, pumps, anything that you may need in that case, that it be pre-positioned. We're not going to get into where it's at, because I'm sure that's probably a security issue, but it be pre-positioned in a location that the licensee can go to that equipment in case everything goes bad, your backup batteries go out and we can't get diesel fuel. One of the findings was, the learning experience was, hey, we maybe need some predispositioned equipment somewhere and a way to get it there, to those nuclear plants. And so did y'all inspect that? And in the inspection, can you tell the public that, hey, that equipment is in place, we're ready to go? Can you tell us that?
That particular equipment, we believe, we refer to it as SBO diesel.
Okay, station blackout diesel, we
Yeah.
had 2 of those. It was inspected, post Fukushima temporary instructions. So absolutely.
Okay, and that is available, y'all.
Oh, it's absolutely.
Okay. For instance, another area on emergency preparedness now, did y'all inspect the disposition and the availability of potassium iodide tablets? Is that available to the community?
I'm not going to answer one way or another on that, because that's beyond our particular, what the residents do. I I think there's provision to have those stockpiles, and then our EP group looks at those periodically, but I could not speak to that right now.
For instance, or the neighbors around here, it's one thing I've noticed, you know, man, this area is building up around here. So obviously, but, you know, just like the prepositioning of equipment in the case of emergency, also those potassium iodide pills, I believe are a requirement to be distributed within that 10-mile radius and to not be expired. Now, I would think now, you know, the EMAs, the county EMAs ought to have information on that. I would think that the TVA ought to have information on that, and the NRC ought to be inspecting that to ensure that those are out there. And nobody wants to think of the unexpected, but if it happens, you need to be prepared.
I agree
So,
with everything you said. In
Is it
terms
there?
of answering that specific question, we're not the ones that actually do that particular part of it, but there is a part of the NRC that looks at the emergency preparedness and potassium iodide distribution and how the licensee and the state work together to have those
Right.
stockpiles.
but y'all did inspect that in your inspection on your annual review?
Annual review, the one that Gail presented.
That's right. Is that a part of your annual review and emergency preparedness?
Looking at potassium iodide is not part of our resident baseline inspection. It could be very well part of a different type of requirement in being met. That what we're talking about is the operational assessment, how the plant operated, how it was maintained within their design. It's two different things. So I don't want to overspeak it, but I would think that the state, that perhaps the licensee can give a contact for their state rep and talk with them and understand how those requirements are being inspected by the NRC and the state.
See, it's where I'm looking at, you know, this is all part of emergency preparedness and readiness, and particularly within the 10-mile zone, which is established, of course, now environmental movement. I am curious. I mean, I would think that the distribution of the equipment, y'all say you're confident of that, but the distribution of potassium iodine pills seems to be a big question. And of course, if there is a situation that arises, you need them. I mean, you know, hey, did somebody distribute them? It's too late then. You need to know that they're out there and people have them in their hand if they need it, or there's a central location. So this is the reason I'm asking this. If you don't know, I would like to have a number I can call to find that out. You know, that,
We'll be happy to give you a number.
thanks, I
We
appreciate
do, I
it.
don't want to let you think that we don't look at their emergency preparedness. Wes and I just looked at a recent drill. We evaluated the licensee's performance. We watched them, they start the drill on the simulator. We watch their activities in the technical support center and the operations support center, and how they interact with the state, how they report to the state, you know, what classification of emergency are they in, and what are the protective action recommendations. We evaluate all that, but that piece of the potassium iodide, I mean, that's something we don't.
Here's what I want you to do. You can get a copy of our slides, my number's in there.
Okay,
Just give me a call.
I will.
And I'll put you in contact with the right person in our EP group that can follow on that question.
thank you.
Do you
It's not a hard question to get to. I
do
just
you
don't know the
inspect
answer.
the employee performance and safety within the plant itself? In other words, what is the maximum dosage that an employee is allowed, a Sequoyah employee allowed in a year?
That would be 5 around 3 years.
5
But
rand?
the doses are probably less than 1/10 of that.
5 rand, did you
Per
say?
year, correct.
That's the annual NRC limit.
That's the occupational limit.
And is there, I know they wear badges and they got dosimeters or those kind of things, is that done on a regular?
It's tracked to the milli rate. That's how they do it.
It's